Now back to our top story, the flooding in Alberta.
They're hoping for the best, but preparing for the worst. In the southern Alberta town of Drumheller, people from dozens of communities in and around the area are lending a hand, shoring up earth, and dikes, and sandbagging homes. And more than a third of Drumheller's residents have been forced from their homes.
I have my doubts, but then there's always a chance that it will flood.
Drumheller has a dramatic history that has been carved into the valley through weather and environmental changes. The defining moments of the last 100 years have all centered around the river. With no less than 8 major flooding events since 1915, flooding has taken its toll on the financial and social fabric of the valley. Let's put our past into perspective with flow rates, which is how we measure floods. Many of you were around for the floods in 2005, which were 1,450 cubic meters per second. And 2013 was 1,310 cubic meters per second. Maybe some were around to experience the flood in 1954 at 1,530 cubic meters per second. You may be saying, we didn't experience damage during those floods. Why worry now? Let's go back a bit further to 1915 when the town experienced 2,000 cubic meters per second. If we experienced that flow rate today, the town would be devastated. That is what we are protecting to and beyond.
Putting the river at the center of planning is, I would say, the defining and the fundamental approach to all of the work that we've been doing here.
What we find is that the 21 areas that we have in the bylaw right now cause us to screen everything simply through those 21 different categories to make certain that all the boxes check. What the modern approach to the municipal development plan and to the land use bylaw are those 8 areas that we've talked about that we will use as frameworks or screens in the first instance to say, does your development that's planned check all these boxes? The floodplain, the badlands, tourism, these types of things. If it makes it past that first screen, then it sifts into one of these 8 categories where the MPC, the development officer, the subdivision development appeal board and or council would then give it further scrutiny if we couldn't find something that fit in those areas. So by far, this is going to accelerate the development process for developers, residents in the valley. It is going to enable quick, speedy results. And moreover, it's going to give certainty to those outside to look at Drumheller and say, I understand this.
For the town, it's about enabling development to happen on a much more smooth basis, so less questions. It's really about trying to help, again, stimulate the development, make it easier for people to kind of come in and have a very easy, clean guidebook on what to do economic development within the community. So really helping people get their business up and running as fast as possible and without any barriers or delays.
Understanding where the river wants to go, we needed to understand how that flow and how that movement would impact existing development and development potential moving forward. And from there, once we understood those sort of conflict areas of existing development, we started to look at an alignment analysis to look and to start to think about where potential structural measures that would comprise our adaptive protection system could be placed. And from there, you could start to look at, if there has to be a planned retreat, whether or not there's a potential dike conflict. And then from there, you were able to really start to look at adaptive protection measures themselves, where we can make room for the river to keep the channel as wide as possible, to really start to assess where, structural measures can really go in.
We're going to have generally 3 areas in the valley when we're done with the new municipal development plan going forward. And that is going to be conveyance areas that is reserved for the river to flow in. Our aim is not to have any dwellings, no residences in that area. So that's on the wet side of the dike, so-called. Where we create dikes from there until we get to what we're calling our 2100 system, or a very, very high flow rate, they'll be behind dikes, which makes them a protected zone. And in that protected zone, there's rules that are in the present land use bylaw, and there's rules that are going to be in the new land use bylaw that say you must build your main floor elevation to this, your mechanical systems must be on another floor, and move forward. Outside of that area, in the dry area, if you will, the flood rules won't have to apply there, of no openings in the basement of the the mechanical rooms upstairs. We've got a really good plan here. It's being looked at by other municipalities and the province of Alberta as a hallmark, as a new way of doing things, and I'm pretty excited with what we've achieved.
And I understand from a resident, from living here all my life, that it is important, and we have to keep the information so that people are getting the facts. And as you both know, the community vision for our town is to be the cleanest, friendliest, most sought after community. How is this plan going to help our vision?
It'll be fundamental, actually, in helping with your vision. And I think what we even need to acknowledge is that within the existing municipal development plan, there isn't a vision. So that's the fundamental starting point for where all of your land use policy and where all of your direction should come from, is that community vision. So it's taking that initial step here, you just said, but expanding it into really thinking about how the valley can grow and change and really build upon itself over the next 20 or 30 years. And that's what a municipal development plan can do. And that's the fundamental component behind it.
It's time to recognize that while the river is one of Drumheller's greatest assets, it is also by far its greatest threat. Weather patterns have become increasingly volatile and extreme, and the financial landscape is experiencing massive fluctuations. The next flood is not a matter of if, it's a matter of when, and unfortunately, we can't rely on government and insurance companies to bail us out in the future. The money won't be there. We need to face the facts that our environmental and financial landscapes are changing, and the time to act is now.